We have an absolutely massive patch on our hands with a plethora of changes to the jungle, along with adjustments to reduce the power of Snowball mechanics in the game. A bunch of champion changes are on the way as well, with nerfs to Kai'Sa and Zed, while Jinx and Melio will receive buffs. With the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data, we are set to bring you guys a complete update on the solo queue meta for patch 13.20. But before we get into it, be sure to check out Skill Capped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. Let's kick things off by diving into the jungle adjustments, and first up are some changes to Smite. Champion pet damage is going down from 20 scaling to 160 to just 40 at all ranks. The damage type of Smite is also being changed from a spell to a proc, which means that it will not trigger Liandry's. All in all, a nerf to all junglers across the board, but an even bigger nerf to the likes of Karthus, Lilia, and occasionally Taliyah. Smite upgrades are also going to be targeted, with green and blue Smite seeing their power reduced. Red Smite is going to stay the same though. So for green Smite, or also known as Moss Stomper, the tenacity and slow resist is being completely removed. Shield value, however, is being increased, going from 60 scaling to 281 from levels 1 to 18 to 180 scaling to 300 from levels 10 to 18. Riot has stated that this will equate to around 2 to 7% more shielding. As for blue Smite, or also known as Gust Walker, the brush movement speed is reduced from 45 to 30%. Monster kill movement speed is down as well, from 60 to 45%. The damage reduction from epic monsters that you would receive from your upgrades when 2 or more allies were nearby is being removed. This means those early Baron takes are going to be a bit more risky now. Jungle camp health is being changed, and we'll put all the changes up on screen here, but it's a bit difficult to understand by just looking at the numbers. In the simplest terms possible, your first clear will remain the same. Nothing changes there. It's your second clear that is going to become a bit slower. In other words, health on camps will be the exact same throughout your first clear, but when you rotate your camps for a second time, they'll be a bit healthier, leading to a slower clear speed. A small nerf to farming junglers with this one, as reaching that level 6 spike on the likes of Nocturne, Evelynn, Karthus, or Rengar is going to take you a bit longer. One of the bigger changes here is to pet DPS ratios. Bonus AD ratio on pet damage is dropping by 10%, AP ratio is being lowered by 2%, however the armor and magic resist ratios are being increased by 10%. One jungler to really watch out for as a result of these changes is Rammus. The champion almost always wants to rush that Thornmail, so his clear should be feeling a lot nicer relative to other junglers as a result of this change. Of course, other tank junglers will benefit as well, but we see Rammus as the biggest winner due to the fact he's going to be getting more armor from his first item than other tank junglers. Currently on live servers, when you kill a jungle camp, you are healed for a base amount of 30 scaling to 160, which is increased by up to 225% based on your missing health. Riot has changed this so that the base heal is gone, and you'll now be healing for 12% of your missing health. This is an overall nerf to the healthiness of your jungle clear. You will be healing more when you drop low on health, but unless you're extremely low, the heal will be less impactful. The same change is being issued to junglers' mana sustain. Base mana from killing camps is gone, and you'll now receive 20% of your missing mana on kill. In previous patches, it was almost impossible for a variety of junglers to even drop low on health when clearing their jungle, so these changes will look to combat that. The build in sustain was so crazy that high elo junglers completely stopped taking a health potion at level 1, and were actually winning significantly more than those who bought a potion. The difference in win rate was ludicrous, as for example, Hecarim players that started without a potion were winning 53% of the time, and those who bought a potion were only winning 47% of the time. Off of just one simple adaptation, that gap in win rate can literally be the difference between an OP pick and a B tier pick, which is nuts. It's tough to say if the no potion start will be viable, but it's definitely going to become a bit weaker. Scuttle Crab is going to receive a minor adjustment, as it will now be a bit healthier, but provide you with a bit more gold and XP later on in the game. We don't expect this change to really shift the priority at all on early scuttles. One change that will actually benefit junglers is Riot increasing the armor and magic resist of camps, while increasing jungle item bonus damage to non-epic monsters from 20 to 42%. What this means is that you as a jungler will be dealing the exact same amount of damage to camps as you would before, however, laners will now be dealing significantly less. If the enemy mid or top wants to try and invade your jungle and steal away a camp, it's now going to take them more time, which in the end may no longer even be worth it for them. As a jungler, it can also be extremely frustrating when your teammates take your camps in the mid game, so maybe this change will be enough to dissuade them from doing so as often. So that last change is really the only buff to jungle, as we have another nerf lined up, this time to minion experience. Minion XP penalty is going from 60 scaling to 25% from minute 0 to 14 to now 70 scaling to 0% from minute 0 to 20. This means when you're trying to help your laner shove a wave in, or you're catching a wave for them after they die, you'll be rewarded slightly less. The comeback XP threshold is being adjusted for 13.20, going from 1.1 levels down to 1.5 levels down. What this means is you'll now need to be more than 1.5 levels lower than your opponent in order to have the comeback experience buff kick in for you. This should be a win for good junglers, as when you get a lead, the enemy jungler won't be able to come back as quick as before. To reduce the early game gank power of junglers, all starting items will have their health increased. AD is also going to be going up on Doran's blade, while AP is up on Doran's ring. Not only will these changes reduce early gank threat, but they will decrease the versatility of starting items. We can't see there being a way in which you'd prioritize a longsword or Kull start over a Doran's item now that they are being buffed so heavily. A ton of ADCs in recent patches had been rushing Kull, but now if you go Kull and the enemy starts Doran's, you're going to be in a pretty big disadvantage early on that it's likely no longer worth it to start off with the Kull. Even though Riot has these changes listed as nerfs to early jungle ganks, they nerf the early game kill threat of laners as well. Champs with strong kill power in the early levels are going to become slightly weaker, while scaling champs and picks that just want to farm more throughout the first few levels become stronger. Scaling champs who have already been great low elo stompers in recent patches, like Aurelion Sol and Malzahar, are only going to become more valuable tickets out of low elo for 13.20. Up in the top lane, someone like Nasus should also be really liking the direction of 13.20. On the flip side, LeBlanc, Quinn, Olaf, and Talon are going to see a decrease in strength moving forward. As if LeBlanc wasn't already in the dumpster after her 13.19 nerfs, she's going to be pretty unplayable for 13.20. Next up, we have a bunch of changes that are aimed at reducing how snowball-y League is. Every single dragon is going to have its effects reduced. Now, in compensation though, the effects of Dragon Soul are going to be increased. So each individual dragon will no longer give you as many stats. However, when you complete Soul, you'll be getting a bigger buff. With this change, you might be thinking, well, won't Rift Herald just be of way more priority now moving forward? That won't really be the case since it's getting nerfed too. Gold from Rift Herald is going down from 200 to 100. Another change that will reduce the effectiveness of early Rift Herald is the fact that turret plating gold is dropping. That first Rift Herald before 14 minutes could net you a mass amount of gold, but now with the gold from Killing Rift dropping and turret plate gold going from 175 to 125, you're not going to get as far ahead from taking the early Rift. Of course, this turret plating change affects laners as well, and will make things a bit less punishing for roaming champions. To reduce snowball power even further, death timers for the first 9 levels are being lowered. From levels 2 to 3, they are dropping by 2 seconds, levels 4 to 6 by 4 seconds, level 7 by 5 seconds, level 8 by 6.5 seconds, and level 9 by 4 seconds. For mid lane especially, in order to keep up tempo after scoring an early kill, it's going to be way more important that you do not delay your base timer now. With plate gold being lowered too in a lot of spots, it's going to be way more worth it to bypass that plating gold in exchange for being back on the map at the same time as the enemy laner. Another huge change that aims to reduce the early game snowball power across the board is a nerf to a bunch of keystone runes. Electrocute, Dark Harvest, Comet, Airy, Fleet, Press the Attack, First Strike, Taste of Blood, Conqueror, and Lethal Tempo are all having their effects reduced. A few notable keystone runes that avoided nerfs include Aftershock, Glacial Augment, Grasp, Hail of Blades, Guardian, and Phase Rush. This should lead to a pretty big shakeup in rune priority for certain champions. For example, Garen and Hecarim have been split between Conqueror and Phase Rush in recent patches, but it's likely Phase just becomes the go-to option now. Tristana has been viable with both Lethal Tempo and Hail of Blades, so with Lethal nerfed, we likely see Hail of Blades priority rise. A pretty big change is being issued to Baron that will prevent you from being able to sneak early Barons as easy as before. Health on Baron is going up from 12,600 to 15,000. This is actually pretty massive and will probably take players a bit of time to get used to. Trying to take an early Baron will be more of a gamble now and give the opposing team a bit more time to react and collapse on you. It's likely we're going to see a lot more Baron throws at the start of this patch. With the jungle and anti-snowball changes covered, let's move on to looking at some of the item and rune adjustments. First up is a buff to Blighting Jewel, as its cost is being lowered from 1250 to 1100. This is a buff to mages across the board, as it will give them easier access to Magic Pen against comps that are stacking MR. A buff to Ghostblade and a nerf to Duskblade are hitting the rift for 13.20. Ghostblade is having its haunt passive lethality increased from 3 scaling to 12 to 7 scaling to 18, so a little more burst power being added back onto the item. As for Duskblade, ability haste on the item is being reduced, going from 20 to 15. The maximum Night Stalker passive damage is being lowered, going from 18 to 16%. Keep in mind, this Night Stalker passive has now been nerfed twice. It used to be 20% and now it's down to 16. This change should really level out the playing field for lethality mythics and put Duskblade on a similar level to Ghostblade and Eclipse. Dusk had been the clear-cut winner on a bunch of champions in recent patches, but that's likely no longer going to be the case. The lethality Kai'Sa build that had really been picking up traction in recent patches is going to become quite a bit weaker as a result of this nerf too. Lord Doms is going to be adjusted for this patch as Riot has fixed a bug so that the item will now properly amplify damage dealt into shield. To compensate for this bug fix though, the maximum damage amp is dropping from 25 to 22%. Riot expects this change to be power neutral, and with Lord Doms not being a staple early game pickup on any ADCs, we don't see anything meta shifting as a result of these adjustments. Just one rune change for this patch, and it's going to be water walking. Movement speed from the rune is dropping from 25 to 10. Adaptive force, however, is going up from 5 scaling to 30 to 13 scaling to 30. One champ who is hit the hardest by these adjustments is Hecarim, as he benefits from movement speed more than most champions due to his passive converting MS into damage. It will be very interesting to see what Hecarim lands on here in 13.20, because with Conqueror nerfed, he wants phase rush more, but then with water walking nerfed, he's just worse off running the sorcery tree. It's kind of a lose-lose situation for the champion. Whichever way you choose to go, you're just going to be weaker on Hecarim for 13.20. Champs that have strong mobility in their kits like Bel'Veth may actually be liking the direction of the changes. More damage in exchange for less movement speed should be a net win, just due to the fact Bel'Veth has so much built-in mobility from her Q. Does the champion actually drop Inspiration Secondary though because of this? Likely not, but in theory, the rune should be stronger for her. Water walking could be very interesting on Kindred now because the added damage can be very useful for those scuttle fights to help secure marks. There are just two top lane champions who will be adjusted for 13.20, and first up is Quinn. Quinn has been a great solo queue top lane champion as of recent, and a menace into meta fighters, so Riot's looking to tone down her early game strength. Health is dropping from 603 to 565. Movement speed is lowered from 335 to 330. To compensate, scaling power is being increased with attack damage growth going from 2.4 to 2.7, but this buff is definitely not enough to make up for those early game nerfs. When evaluating Quinn's power level, we also have to take into account the health buffs to starting items. Solo kills will become a bit harder to come by in 13.20, which further reduces the viability of Quinn. We'll definitely be dropping Quinn out of OP tier for 13.20, but where she lands exactly is a bit difficult to predict, so for now, she will move into S tier, but a push into A could be warranted for the mid-patch tier list if the item changes do end up really affecting her snowball power. K'Sante is without question the champion with the most amount of changes for 13.20, as Riot are trying to lower his viability for pro play while making him a better solo queue champion in the long run. If you want a TLDR on the changes, then skip ahead near the end of the timestamp for the top lane changes, as there is a ton to cover here. Early game strength is going to be reduced quite heavily, as his base health drops from 610 to 570. Health per level is up from 108 to 115, while armor growth is going from 4.7 to 5.2. Not only will K'Sante be more vulnerable early on, his kill threat is also dropping. Q damage is down from 50 scaling to 150 to 30 scaling to 150. A big adjustment here as well is that you will no longer be able to flash during Q3. W is also receiving a big quality of life change, as it will now have a minimum channel time of 0.65 seconds. W mana cost is actually buffed though, going from 75 scaling to 95 to 60 scaling to 80. Stun duration on W is now also just going to be a flat 1.25 seconds at all ranks. W damage reduction is going to be increased, going from 25% plus 10% bonus armor and magic resist, plus 1% bonus health to just a flat 40 scaling to 65% based on level. W damage is going up, as it's no longer going to just scale off the target's max health, and instead have a base amount, a 50% total AD ratio, a 30% bonus armor and magic resist ratio, and give you percent health damage as well. Lots of changes to R here, so let's take a look. R base damage is going up, but the spell will no longer scale off 20% of your total AD. R knockback damage is down, and R wall damage is also being reduced. R bonus AD will not scale as hard with your armor and magic resist, and instead have a higher base value. To compensate for this lack of burst damage from R now, K'Sante will gain 25 scaling to 45% bonus attack speed on use. Riot has stated they want K'Sante to be more of a sustained damage champion instead of a bursty champ, which is the direction they're taking by issuing these changes. R heal and heal cap are being adjusted as well. R is now going to reset Q cooldown and stacks, while R plus Q is going to slow. There are also a bunch of changes with R plus W that are similar to the W changes that we talked about earlier, but just with greater effects due to it being R plus W instead of just W alone. All in all, Riot is looking to reduce the damage output of K'Sante while making him a bit tankier to compensate. The biggest issue that a lot of players have had with the champion is that he's a tank that can also deal a disgusting amount of damage. So moving forward, they want him to lean into more of that tank identity while being less of a bursty damage threat. With so many changes, we'd be lying if we told you we had any clue where K'Sante will land power-wise for 13.20. There are just so many moving parts here, so instead of prematurely moving K'Sante on the tier list, we will wait to see how the dust settles and give you a more accurate update in our mid-patch tier list next week. So, taking a look at the complete top lane tier list, we have Malphite, Garen, and Illaoi in the OP tier. So, why are we moving Garen up for this patch? Well, Quinn is nerfed, so with her dropping out of the OP tier, it opens up a spot. Garen is a top lane champion who's actually benefiting from the 13.20 rune changes due to him being able to run phase rush, with the vast majority of top lane fighters reliant on Conqueror or lethal tempo, and both of those runes being nerfed, Garen will become indirectly stronger. Illaoi and Malphite have been great carries in recent patches and only become stronger in 13.20 as well. Both champions run Grasp, which means all the fighters around them that go Conqueror or lethal tempo become weaker, giving them a small boost in strength. A top lane champion that should really benefit from the reduction of rune damage and the increased health on starting items is Nasus. It won't be easy to bully Nasus out of lane now, which in turn allows him to scale easier and reach his mid to late game more consistently. We'll be moving Nasus up into the top lane S tier as a result. We're not going to make any other drastic changes to the pre-patch tier list because it's unclear exactly how impactful the anti-Snowball changes will be. We do expect some early game reliant picks like Olaf, Darius, Warwick, and Renekton to lose some power this patch, but exactly how much power is yet to be determined. Be sure to check back for the mid-patch tier list update, as we'll have a few days to play the patch by then and get a much better idea of how these massive changes play out. A few of the best top lane bans of the patch are Illaoi, Aatrox, and Malphite. You really can't go wrong with Malphite, Nasus, or Garen if you want to climb out of low elo the fastest. There's just one jungler with direct changes for 13.20 and being hit with a bunch of nerfs is Bel'Veth. Passive bonus attack speed after spellcast is going from 25 scaling to 50% and scaling linear by level to 20 scaling to 40% and scaling using stat progression multiplier. E damage reduction drops significantly at the earlier ranks, going from 70% at all ranks to 42 scaling to 70%. E damage can now crit, but the base damage is dropping from 8 scaling to 16 to 6 scaling to 10. EAD ratio is up from 6 to 8%. On hit damage is up as well from 6 to 8%. Our true form out of combat movement speed is being lowered from 25 scaling to 75 to 10 scaling to 80. Our Remora health drops from 20 scaling to 60% to 20 scaling to 70%. So overall, less skirmish power coming out of Bel'Veth. Offensive builds do become a bit more attractive now, but it's likely Bruiser's setups still remain the most optimal. We'll be adjusting Bel'Veth on the jungle tier list, moving her from S into A tier. Taking a look at the jungle tier list, it's going to be Briar taking home the only OP tier slot for 13.20. Briar is just a cut above everyone else right now, and especially with the champion being new, she should only trend more positively for 13.20. With your jungle clear becoming a bit slower the second time around, we'll have to see how this affects farming junglers. It will take you a bit longer to hit level 6 now, which can be detrimental to champions who are ult reliant. At the same time though, ganking is going to be a bit harder to pull off due to starting items becoming more healthy, so you could argue that ganking and farming junglers will both become weaker, which in turn would mean the relative power of all junglers wouldn't really move that much. Being as efficient as possible in the jungle is going to be even more important this patch, so our latest website course on jungle efficiency will really help you out. We're not going to jump the gun and make any drastic changes to the jungle tier list right now, as there's just too many adjustments this patch, which makes it difficult to get a super accurate read on where everything will land until we get a good few days to play the patch. If we were to make a bold prediction though, watch out for lower econ tank junglers. With gold from Rift being lowered, turret plating gold dropping, and the jungle pet damage armor and magic resist scaling being increased, tanks should be on the come up. Nunu has been very close to an S tier slot in previous patches, so we're going to be giving him the bump up for 13.20. Zac and Rammus are two other tanks that have been quite good in recent patches that should be really great picks moving forward. One champion we do expect to become quite a bit weaker and moving down the tier list is Hecarim. Nerfs to Duskblade, nerfs to Water Walking, nerfs to Gustwalker, and nerfs to Conqueror are all negatives for the champion, and he'll be dropping into A tier. A few of the best jungle bans for 13.20 include Briar, Evelynn, and Nocturne. Rammus, Amumu, and Nocturne are three champs who excel quite a bit more in the lower ranks that are great to help you get out of low elo. Galio is being buffed here for a second patch in a row, and it's going to be 2 buffs to his W. W cooldown is being lowered at the later ranks, only going from 18 scaling to 16 seconds to 18 scaling to 14 seconds. W passive shield time drops at the later ranks as well, from 12 to 12 scaling to 8 seconds. If Riot were to have also given early game buffs to these changes, then we could very well see Galio making his way back into meta, but the changes being more late game focused means we don't see him becoming that much stronger, and he'll remain in the mid lane A tier. Uxin is targeted with a nerf for 13.20, as his Q bonus movement speed is dropping from 40% to 20, scaling to 40%. A hit to the early game safety of Uxin, and with starting items receiving more health for this patch, it will be interesting to see how heavily that affects the lane bully power of the champion. We don't expect Uxin to lose a ton of power as a result of these changes, so he'll remain in the mid lane S tier for now. For those that max W out second on Zed in recent patches, it looks like that will no longer be viable in 13.20. W cooldown is being increased from 20 scaling to 14 seconds to 20 scaling to 17 seconds. Now, only a 3-second difference from rank 1 to max rank, which means it probably won't be worthwhile to max the spell out second. At the same time though, if you you do not max the spell second, this is now a 6-second longer cooldown level 13 onwards, which will drastically reduce the skirmish power of Zed in the mid to late game. Whichever way you look at it, Zed will be hit pretty hard by this change, and with Duskblade nerfed as well, it's not looking great. Zed, being a champion who hasn't historically liked running a Doran's item, will suffer from those items being buffed as well. With other Doran's champs becoming stronger, it's just going to make Zed indirectly weaker throughout the early game. All in all, a really bad patch here if you are a Zed main, and unless you are a one-trick, better options for mid lane moving forward, as we'll be moving him into the mid lane B tier. We'll be making a few adjustments to the mid lane tier list for 13.20, as the OP tier is going to consist of 2 champions, being Vex and Kassadin. As noted earlier in the video, the changes to Doran's starting items will have an impact on the meta. Kassadin should be loving this patch, as more early game durability means an easier time farming up and reaching that godly mid to late game. With Zed nerfed, it's an indirect win for Kassadin, so lots of changes going in Cass's favor for 13.20. Someone like Aurelion Sol should benefit a ton from this patch as well. Less snowball mechanics means it's more likely you're going to consistently hit that late game, and we all know how disgusting Aurelion is when he reaches a few items. We actually have a brand new Aurelion Sol full game commentary on our website from our challenger mid laner Sori, so it's perfect timing if you're looking to pick up and learn the champ. A few other notables that have really strong mid-game spikes but are weaker early on that will benefit from this patch include Corki, Azir, Ryze, Veigar, and Victor. On the flip side, a champion who is more reliant on snowballing and getting those early solo kills like Talon will be on the decline. High up on the ban list for mid lane in 13.20 are Kassadin, Naafiri, and Vex. A couple of great low elo picks to add to your arsenal are Malzahar, Aurelion Sol, and Annie. Riot has finally decided to give Jinx a bit of attention, as she has been a bottom tier ADC for many months. Health per level is going up from 100 to 105. Passive bonus attack speed is now going to stack on kills, which will make the cleanup power of Jinx even more ridiculous. Our cooldown is going to be reduced by 5 seconds at all ranks. Our minimum damage is up slightly, while the maximum damage is being increased as well. All things considered, when you combine everything together, some pretty nice buffs to Jinx. We definitely expect these changes to be enough to move Jinx back into a relatively strong spot for solo queue, so we'll be moving her from B into A tier for 13.20. A champion who has more traditionally been known as a mid laner, but whose best role right now is bot lane, will be buffed for 13.20. The champ we're referring to is Ziggs, and he will see his Q radius increase from 150 to 180. Extremely impactful buff to Ziggs here, and one that could very well see him becoming quite popular moving forward. Whether he's popular or not, we expect Ziggs to be one of the best bot lane carries that you can play for this patch, and we'll be moving him into the OP tier. A nerf to Kai'Sa is on the way, with her base armor dropping from 28 to 25. We also have to take into account that Duskblade is nerfed this patch, which will negatively impact the lethality Kai'Sa build that has become the most popular. With both of these changes in mind, we'll be moving Kai'Sa down the tier list for 13.20, as she'll be placed in the ADC A tier. 13.20 is going to be a pretty big patch for the ADC meta, as we're making multiple adjustments. Moving up into the OP tier and joining Ashe will be Ziggs and Vayne. We already talked about how the Ziggs buff will impact him, but as for Vayne, she will be loving the less snowbally nature of the game. Vayne has been super close to moving into OP tier in recent patches, so we think that with all the anti-snowball changes, it will be enough to give her that extra power needed for an OP tier spot. Although this change won't impact you in all games, the fact that Baron's health is being increased is indirectly less of a blow for Vayne than many other ADCs, due to the fact she has % health true damage from W. A pretty sleeper ADC as a result of the adjustments for 13.20 will be Kog'Maw, for a lot of the same reasons to why Vayne becomes stronger. We expect for Draven to take the biggest nosedive of all ADCs, as he's more early game reliant than most, and the changes are not great for him in that regard. Samira is likely a loser from this patch as well, as early kills will be less frequent to come by, and the Duskblade nerfs will negatively influence her. Topping the ban list for ADC in 13.20 will be Kai'Sa, Vayne, and Ezreal. A few ADCs well worth picking up for the lower ranks include Sivir, Misfortune, and Ashe. One support in dire need of buffs will be given exactly that for 13.20, as we have some changes to Melio. Passive burn will now always consider Melio's damage and will not steal kill credit. Passive will also enable Chemtech Putrefier through allies. E cooldown is being reduced by 1 second at all ranks. E shield is going up at the later ranks only from 60 scaling to 160 to 60 scaling to 180. Our healing will have its AP ratio buffed from 30 to 50%. All things considered, some pretty minor buffs mainly targeted at helping Melio out in the mid to late game. These don't look like enough to significantly increase Melio's power level, so he will remain in the support B tier. The second and final support being changed for 13.20 is Morgana. We are going to see her AP ratio on W increased from 14 to 17%. W monster damage is up as well from 155 to 165. E cooldown is being increased by 2 seconds at rank 1, but will stay the same when maxed out. Our movement speed is being changed from 5 scaling to 55% towards enemies to 10 scaling to 60% in all directions. This will be a really nice buff to help with the peel strength of Morg. Our stun duration is up from 1.5 seconds to 1.5 scaling to 2 seconds. Our damage is going up by 25 at all ranks, but keep in mind the damage applies twice, so it's actually a 50 damage buff if you get the initial and final proc off. With these buffs combined with Caitlyn making a push back in a meta for ADC, Morg should be in a really nice spot for 13.20. Not quite S tier worthy, but a good A tier pick. Let's have a look at the complete support tier list, as the 3 champions taking home OP tier spots will be Zyra, Blitzcrank, and Senna. With 13.20 being the anti-Snowball patch, we're really high on Senna for support as she scales incredibly well, and this patch should be great for her as a result. It's hard to say if we'll see a drastic meta shift due to the changes, but what we can say is that Enchanter and Mage supports will be on the rise, while CC engaged supports become a bit weaker. More health on starting items means that those early level 2 kills on supports like Rakan, Nautilus, and Blitz will be a bit harder to come by. Soraka, Janna, and Sona are 3 Enchanter supports that should lead the way for 13.20 and are all placed in our support S tier. A few of the best support bans of the patch are Senna, Blitzcrank, and Rakan. To dominate low elo from the support role, we have Heimerdinger, Zyra, and Blitz rated quite highly. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about Skill Capped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So there you have it guys, a complete look at 13.20, which is going to be a doozy of a patch. Thank you all so much for watching, good luck in solo queue, and we'll see you back soon.